Hi class, I wanted to kind of pop on here and go over the next thing that we're going to be doing in painting class, and hopefully everybody's able to see this. I'm going to make sure I'm kind of keeping it where you can all see it. If you do not have all the paints that are listed on this handout, we're going to make do with whatever you've got handy at home since we're doing the virtual learning. I do have handouts and your canvases and everything prepped down for you at the front office. You would need to have a palette, but this could even be just like a paper plate that you have at home that you're putting a little bit of the acrylic paints into, and just give you an example of, here's one example of Apple Barn acrylic paint. You can pick this up at Walmart. Just make sure that it says the acrylic paint on it and not tempera paints. The temperas tend to get chalky and crack really easily, where the acrylics are a little bit more forgiving in that manner. So you could use just a paper plate. It's always nice to have handy is your paper towel. And this is just one of the square acrylic brushes, but they do have sets of brushes. And I did take a look at the dollar store. Now, they don't have a brush set that has all 6 of them in there, but even the dollar store has just small acrylic brush sets, and they do sell the acrylic paints there too. So if that's a possibility, I know some of you had reached out to me and had asked about brushes and acrylic paints, things that you would want to have at home. Again, that is optional. But for this assignment, we're just going to be doing, to start off with, color theory mixing chart. This is very similar to what we did with the watercolor unit, where you're creating swatches and you're just getting a feel of how the colors and the new media mixes together. So you'll see over here, you've got the first column that says yellow going across and yellow coming up from the bottom. So what you would do in this square right here is you would just mix yellow and yellow and see what happens. So for that example, we're just going to start with a pure yellow. I'm just going to dip it in here and load the paint up on my brush. Notice nothing's dripping off the side of my brush. I just loaded enough that'll cover the square, and then I'm going to go over to my sheet and you carefully paint in, trying to cover as much of that paper white as possible. Now, normally I would be moving my paper and twisting it, but just to make sure I stay on camera here, I'm going to try to keep my paper steady, and I'm just applying. Notice I haven't dipped back in, and I did choose the square brush here because I am going into a square, so it just keeps my edges nice and tight there. Okay, for the next square, this is mixed yellow and orange. So I'm just following the yellow across and orange across. So I'd be mixing yellow and orange. So for that, I'm just going to go ahead and drag the palette where you can see it a little bit better. And here I'm going to take equal parts. I'm just dipping into my yellow, loading some of that up. I don't need a lot of this mixed up because I'm just filling in a small square and trying to get equal portions of the yellow and orange, and I'm just mixing that together right off to the side here, making sure that I'm coating my entire brush. So now I have my new color right down here, yellow and orange, and I would go ahead and paint that in right here. And if you need more, because my brush is kind of drying out, it just dipped back into my palette, trying to get a nice even coat, and I'm turning my brush so I'm filling that entire square. So now I've got a nice mix of yellow and orange. You'll notice the next column over, if I go across with my brush here, that is in the orange column, and down here is in the orange column. So my pure orange is actually going to go right next to that. So I'm seeing how I can do my color mixing and create new recipes that I could possibly use either in my Impressionist cherry tree or as I do my 3D acrylic mask. Okay. So now hopefully you're able to see that. We've got 3 different colors, the yellow, yellow orange, and a pure orange right into those columns here. So the next one that I'm going to do, this falls into, again, yellow right down at the bottom. And if I follow that over, I would fall into yellow and red, a red orange, and then a pure red off to the side. So I'm going to turn my palette so you can kind of see. Maybe that's better. If I wanted to just do my pure red right away, I could just dip right in here. Notice I haven't really worried about cleaning off my brush because all of these are warm colors and I'm dipping enough of that pigment onto it that I can just bring it right over to my paper and get that pure fire engine red. And I'm turning my brush. I'm going to try to do this where everybody can still see as I'm still on camera. There, it got a little bit messy, but I'll just bring a nice even coat, trying to cover as much of that paper white as possible. So now I could do my red orange, and I'm just going to mix that right up off to the side. So I'm just taking that extra red that I had, dipping in equal portion with my orange and bringing that over to the palette. Just mixing that up right here in a small little section. And I'm taking my paint over and I'm just going to fill in my next square with the red orange. Now this isn't like with watercolor where you have to wait till one area dries. You can go ahead, as long as you're careful, and paint right next to the last square. There we go. So now I've got my red orange on there. And then over here, if I follow this category up, I'm now going to have a red yellow. So again, just taking and mixing that up with the palette here. I'm dipping into my yellow and bringing that over, and equal portion, dipping in with my red, bringing that over to my palette. And I'm just kind of lightly mixing it together, making sure all the colors kind of blend. And then I can bring it right over to my square, carefully going up to the lines, trying not to go over the lines. And I'm just filling in the square here. There we go. So as for the purposes of the demo, I'm not going to take up too much of your time. Hopefully everybody's able to see the different hues that are happening here. You would continue on filling in the rest of your chart. So the next one that we would go into is purples, blues, greens. Again, if you don't have a color at home, we could skip over that, or you could go in just with color pencil and try to do some color blending with that. If you're in one of my drawing classes, this would be another good opportunity to use your oil pastels. They do give you the control of drawing with a pencil. However, they blend really well together, so you could get all these individual squares filled in with the oil pastels if you have those handy. But we're gonna make do with whatever you've got at home. The last little thing I want to talk about is the black category does get overpowering, so be careful when you're working with the black. I mean, black gets dark really, really easily. So that is this side of the color mixing chart. I'm going to set this aside here. And just quickly show you the back side, which your hard copy is prepped for you at the school. So you could pick this up, but if you have a printer at home, that works just as well too. So because this paper is wet, I'm just gonna set this one aside and let that dry. And I'm grabbing my other copy that I have ready to go here. The back side of it talks about complement colors, and in the rectangles below, you're going to mix complementary colors as described in the kind of recipe that we have. Adding a small percentage of the complement to a base color will tone it down and often make for a more interesting painting. So I'm just going to move down here to where it's the yellow and the violet. And I'm going to clean off my brush a little bit so we can go into this next section. Okay. And then grab my palette and see if I can make it where everybody can see. So over to this side, I do have my purple, and over here I have my yellow, and those are the two main colors that I'm going to be using. So I need 90% yellow, 10% violet. So if I'm saying 1 scoop into the yellow is my 90%, just taking that down and putting it here. Make sure I got enough of the coating. Then I want to try to just barely dip my brush in to get a little bit of that purple loaded on there to represent the 10% in the recipe. And I'm just going to take those two and I'm mixing them together in the palette. Again, this tones down the color and sort of mutes it. And because they're complementary colors, you get more of this kind of warm brown. And I'm just going to take it over to my paper and lay this recipe color down. And if you have to mix it up more to fill in your square, that's fine because you know the recipe to be using. 90% yellow, 10% violet. We're going to go carefully up to those edges and all the way up and around. You would continue on to fill your square, but for the purposes of this demo, we're going to move ahead to now we need 90% violet. So 1 full dip in to my violet paint. And I'm just going to bring that right down over here. Okay. And then 10% yellow. So I'm just going to get just that quarter of my brush with the yellow, and I'm going to mix those together. And I want to make sure I'm spending enough time that all that yellow is getting mixed into the violet. There we go. And then I'm just going to take it over to my paper. Even coat right up to those edges. And this would be the complementary mix of violet and yellow. Nice even coat, turning my brush. Loading back up when it feels like my brush needs just a little bit more paint on there. Carefully going up to the side. And that would be the bottom recipe. Now I'm going to try to lift the sheet so you don't see it with the shine as much, but you can see the two differences. This again is 90% yellow, 10% violet, and then 90% violet with 10% yellow. So that would be your complements for the back side. These squares here, this is orange and blue complementary colors, and then up at the top is a red and green complementary color set. As always, if you have any questions for me or anything that comes up, please reach out to me and let me know. And I'm going to stop the recording right here.